The blood on her riding dress looked almost black against the faded calico fabric. And Samuel Jefferson knew before he dismounted that this woman sprawled in the dirt was either dying or already dead. The Wyoming sun beat down mercilessly on the trail between Enid and Fort Bridger, and vultures had already begun their lazy circles overhead. Samuel's horse snorted and stamped, sensing death or fear or both, but he urged the animal forward anyway. This was no place for a woman alone, injured or otherwise, and he would not leave anyone to die in the dirt like an animal, not after what happened to his sister 3 years back. When he knelt beside her, checking for a pulse at her throat, her eyes flew open with such startling intensity that he jerked backward. They were green as bottled glass and filled with terror. "Easy now," Samuel said, keeping his voice low and steady like he would with a spooked mare. "I am not going to hurt you. My name is Samuel Jefferson. I have a ranch about 5 miles west of here. You are injured." She tried to speak but only managed a hoarse whisper. Her lips were cracked and bleeding from the sun and dehydration. He could see now that she had been shot, the bullet having torn through the flesh of her left shoulder. The bleeding had mostly stopped, but the wound was angry and red around the edges. Infection would set in soon if it had not already. "Can you tell me your name?" Samuel asked, already reaching for his canteen. "Vivian," she managed. "Vivian Caldwell." He lifted her head gently and brought the canteen to her lips. She drank greedily, water spilling down her chin. "Not too much at once," he cautioned. "You will make yourself sick." "They killed him," Vivian said suddenly, her eyes filling with tears. "My father. They killed my father and took everything." Samuel glanced around the empty trail, seeing no sign of a wagon or horses or any other travelers. "Who did this?" "Men, 4 of them. We were traveling from Kansas to meet my uncle in Oregon. They came out of nowhere 3 days ago, shot my father before he could even reach for his rifle. I ran." Her voice broke. "I just ran and hid in the rocks until they left. I tried to bury him, but the ground was too hard in my shoulder. I could not manage it. 3 days in this heat with a gunshot wound and no water. It was a miracle she was alive at all." Samuel made a decision quickly, knowing that standing here talking would not save her life. "I am going to take you to my ranch. We need to get that wound cleaned and stitched before infection kills you. Can you ride?" Vivian tried to sit up and immediately fell back with a cry of pain. Her face had gone white as chalk. "That answers that question," Samuel muttered. He was a big man, over 6 feet tall with broad shoulders built from years of ranch work, and Vivian was slender and small. He could carry her easily enough, but 5 miles on horseback with an injured woman would not be pleasant for either of them. He retrieved a blanket from his saddlebag and spread it on the ground. Then, as gently as possible, he rolled Vivian onto it. She bit her lip hard enough to draw blood but did not cry out. He appreciated her toughness even as he hated causing her more pain. Lifting her in his arms, he stood carefully and turned toward his horse. "This is going to hurt," he warned. "I am sorry for that. Just do it," Vivian whispered. "Please, I do not want to die out here." Getting into the saddle while holding her was awkward, but Samuel managed it with years of practice handling difficult situations. He settled Vivian across his lap, her head resting against his chest, and clicked his tongue to set the horse moving at a careful walk. Every step jostled her, and he could feel her trembling with pain against him, but she never made a sound. "Tell me about your ranch," Vivian said after a few minutes, her voice barely audible over the clip of hooves on the hard, packed trail. Samuel understood that she needed distraction, something to focus on besides the agony in her shoulder. "It is not much," he said. "About 300 acres. I raise cattle mostly, some horses. Have a small house, a barn, a couple of outbuildings." I bought the land 4 years ago with money I saved working for the railroad. Do you live alone? Yes. Had a hired hand last year, but he moved on when he got married. Mostly I manage on my own. It keeps me busy. Sounds lonely, Vivian murmured. Samuel did not respond to that because she was right, and he had no desire to admit it out loud. Instead, he asked, "What about you? What were you and your father planning to do in Oregon?" My uncle has a mercantile in Portland. He offered my father a position after my mother died last winter. There was nothing left for us in Kansas. Our farm failed 2 years running and the bank was going to take the land. We thought we could start fresh out west. Her voice was growing weaker, and Samuel urged the horse to move a bit faster despite the rougher gait. "Stay awake, Vivian. Talk to me. Tell me about Kansas." "Nothing much to tell. Flat land. Lots of wheat. We had a small farm outside of Lawrence. I helped my father work the fields after my mother got sick. I can plow a straight line and birth a calf and shoot a rifle, though apparently not fast enough to save my father." The bitterness in her voice was sharp as broken glass. "You could not have stopped 4 armed men," Samuel said firmly. "Running was the smart choice. Your father would have wanted you to live." Vivian did not answer, and when Samuel looked down, he saw tears streaming down her dirty cheeks. He tightened his arms around her slightly, offering what small comfort he could, and kicked the horse into a faster pace. The sun was starting its descent toward the western horizon when Samuel's ranch finally came into view. It was not much to look at, he knew. The house was small and plain, built from rough-hewn logs chinked with mud. The barn was larger and in better repair, because Samuel had always cared more about his animals than his own comfort. A windmill creaked in the breeze, pumping water into a trough where several cattle stood drinking. Vivian had fallen unconscious about a mile back, which worried Samuel more than he wanted to admit. He rode straight up to the house and dismounted carefully, cradling her against his chest. She felt hot, feverish already. He would need to work fast. Inside, the house was dim and cool. Samuel had built it with thick walls to keep out the summer heat and winter cold. He laid Vivian on his bed, the only real bed in the single-room cabin, and quickly set about gathering supplies. Water from the pump outside, which he set to boiling on the stove. Clean cloth for bandages, torn from one of his spare shirts. The bottle of whiskey he kept for medicinal purposes. His sewing kit with needle and thread. A sharp knife, also sterilized in the fire. When everything was ready, he returned to Vivian and carefully began cutting away the blood-stiffened fabric of her dress. She stirred and moaned but did not wake. The wound looked worse than he had hoped. The bullet had passed clean through, which was good, but the entrance and exit wounds were both showing signs of infection. He would need to clean them thoroughly. He poured whiskey over the knife and his hands, then began the careful work of cleaning the wound. Vivian woke screaming when the alcohol hit the raw flesh, and Samuel had to hold her down with one hand while he worked. She was surprisingly strong for someone so small and weak with fever. "I know it hurts," he said, putting as much calm authority into his voice as he could manage. "But I have to clean it or you will die. Do you understand me, Vivian? You have to hold still." She was crying, gasping, but she nodded and seemed to gather herself. Her hands clutched at the blanket beneath her, knuckles white with effort, but she stopped fighting him. Samuel worked as quickly as he dared, cleaning away the dried blood and the early signs of infection, then stitching both wounds closed with careful, even stitches. His hands were steady, though inside he was anything but calm. He had helped birth calves and stitch up injured horses, but this was different. This was a woman, young and vulnerable, whose life depended on his skills. Samuel refused to let himself think about what would happen if he failed. He simply focused on the work, one stitch at a time, until both wounds were closed and bandaged. By the time he finished, Vivian had passed out again. Samuel covered her with a clean blanket and stepped back, wiping sweat from his forehead. His shirt was soaked through, and his hands were shaking now that the immediate crisis had passed. He looked down at the woman in his bed and felt something shift in his chest, though he could not have named what it was. She was beautiful, even dirty and injured and pale with fever. Her hair was a rich brown with hints of auburn, tangled and matted now but thick and wavy. Her face was delicate, with high cheekbones and a stubborn chin. She looked young, early 20s perhaps, though the hardness in her eyes when she had been conscious suggested someone who had seen too much trouble for her years. Samuel realized he was staring and turned away abruptly. He needed to tend to his horse, check on the cattle, do the evening chores. Life on a ranch did not stop for anything, not even a beautiful, injured stranger. But he found himself glancing back at Vivian every few minutes as he moved around the small cabin, making sure she was still breathing, still alive. The next 3 days passed in a blur of fever and delirium. Samuel barely left Vivian's side except to do the most essential chores. He bathed her face with cool water, forced broth and water between her lips whenever she was conscious enough to swallow, changed the bandages on her shoulder twice a day. The wound was healing slowly, though the fever raged on. She talked in her sleep, crying out for her father, begging someone to stop, describing scenes that made Samuel's jaw clench with anger at the men who had done this to her. Sometimes she seemed to know he was there, her green eyes focusing on his face with desperate intensity. "Do not let me die," she whispered once, her hand gripping his with surprising strength. "Please, I cannot die like this." "You are not going to die," Samuel told her firmly. "I did not carry you 5 miles just to lose you to a fever. You are tougher than that." Vivian Caldwell. On the 4th morning, the fever broke. Samuel woke from an uncomfortable doze in the chair beside the bed to find Vivian's eyes open and clear, watching him. The first rays of dawn were slanting through the small window, turning her hair to copper and gold. "You look terrible," she said, her voice hoarse but steady. Samuel laughed, surprised by the rush of relief he felt. "You are welcome. I mean it. When was the last time you slept, or shaved?" She reached up with her good hand to touch the heavy beard growth on his jaw, then seemed to realize what she was doing and snatched her hand back. "I have been busy keeping you alive," Samuel said, standing up and stretching. His back protested the movement after days of sleeping in the chair. "How do you feel?" "Like I was shot and dragged 5 miles on horseback," Vivian said. She tried to sit up and winced. "Maybe worse than that, here." Samuel helped her into a sitting position, propping pillows behind her back. "You need to eat something, real food, not just broth. You have lost too much weight." He made her scrambled eggs and bacon, thick slices of bread with butter and jam, coffee strong enough to strip paint. Vivian ate like she was starving, which she probably was. Samuel sat across from her at the small table he had pulled beside the bed and tried not to notice how the morning light made her eyes seem to glow. "How long have I been here?" Vivian asked between bites. 4 days. The fever broke this morning. 4 days. She looked down at herself, seeming to realize for the first time that she was wearing one of his shirts, clean and far too large for her. "My dress. I had to cut it off to treat your wound. I am sorry, I buried it. It was too damaged to save." Vivian nodded slowly. "My father. His body is still out there on the trail. Can you tell me where? I will go back, give him a proper burial." She described the location, about 15 miles east of where Samuel had found her. She had walked, stumbled, crawled that distance with a bullet in her shoulder. Samuel could only imagine the strength and determination that had required. He should be buried next to my mother, Vivian said quietly, in Lawrence, but I suppose that is not possible now. I will make sure he has a decent grave, Samuel promised. I will put up a marker with his name. Thank you. Vivian set down her fork, her appetite apparently gone. I do not even know how to repay you for what you have done. You saved my life. You have cared for me like I was family. I have no money, no way to compensate you. Samuel shifted uncomfortably. I did not ask for payment. Any decent man would have done the same. That has not been my experience with men, Vivian said, her voice hard. Most would have ridden right past, or worse. Samuel did not know how to respond to that, so he just cleared away the dishes and busied himself cleaning up. When he turned back, Vivian had laid down again, her eyes closed. He thought she had fallen asleep until she spoke. What happens now? To me, I mean. I have no money, no family except an uncle in Oregon who does not know I exist anymore. I cannot stay here indefinitely, imposing on your kindness. You are not imposing, Samuel said, more sharply than he intended. You are healing. When you are well enough to travel, we will figure out what comes next. Until then, you rest and get your strength back. That is all you need to worry about. Vivian opened her eyes and looked at him for a long moment, something unreadable in her expression. You are a good man, Samuel Jefferson. He did not know what to say to that either, so he just nodded and went outside to finally tend to the chores he had been neglecting. But her words stayed with him as he worked, warming him in a way the summer sun never could. Over the following weeks, Vivian grew stronger. The wound in her shoulder healed cleanly, leaving a puckered scar that would be with her for life, but causing no lasting damage to her arm. She insisted on helping around the house as soon as she could stand without getting dizzy, despite Samuel's protests that she needed to rest. I am not some delicate flower, she told him firmly, already scrubbing the dishes from breakfast. I grew up on a farm. I know how to work. Besides, I told you I cannot just lie around being useless while you do everything. Samuel had been living alone for so long that having another person in his space felt strange at first. But Vivian moved through his small cabin with easy competence, cooking meals that were actually edible, mending his shirts, sweeping the floors, tending the small vegetable garden behind the house that he had let go to weeds. She never asked permission or waited for instruction. She just saw what needed doing and did it. Within a week, the cabin looked better than it had in years. Within 2, Samuel realized he could not imagine the place without her in it. He tried not to think about what that meant. Tried not to notice the way his heart sped up when she smiled at him over breakfast, or how he found excuses to stay in the cabin during the day when he should have been working. Tried not to acknowledge the growing warmth in his chest when she laughed at something he said, a sound like music in the usually silent house. Vivian seemed to feel it too, though neither of them spoke of it. She would watch him sometimes when she thought he was not looking, her green eyes soft and thoughtful. She found reasons to touch him in passing, a hand on his arm, brushing past him in the small space. Small things, but they sent electricity through Samuel's body every time. One evening about a month after he had found her, they were sitting outside watching the sunset paint the Wyoming sky in shades of orange and pink. Vivian was finally strong enough to walk around the property, and she had been exploring all afternoon with the enthusiasm of someone long confined indoors. Now, she sat beside Samuel on the porch steps, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. I went to see my father's grave today, she said quietly. Thank you for the marker. It is more than he would have expected. Samuel had ridden out 2 weeks earlier and found the body, or what was left of it after the scavengers had done their work. He had buried it deep and built a cairn of stones over it, then carved a simple marker from a piece of good pine. Here lies Robert Caldwell, a good man and loving father. The words had felt inadequate, but they were all he had to offer. He deserved better than to be left for the vultures, Samuel said. He deserved better than to be shot by thieves for a wagon full of furniture and some tools, Vivian said bitterly. He deserved to make it to Oregon and start his new life. He deserved to see me married and give him grandchildren. He deserved a lot of things he never got. Samuel waited, sensing she needed to say more. I keep thinking that I should have done something, Vivian continued. I had a rifle. I could have shot back. Maybe if I had been faster or braver or smarter, maybe he would still be alive. Maybe you would both be dead, Samuel said firmly. 4 armed men against 1 girl and an older man. There was nothing you could have done except die alongside him. Your father would not have wanted that. How do you know what he would have wanted? Vivian turned to him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. You never knew him. Because I had a sister, Samuel said, the words coming out before he could stop them. 3 years younger than me. Sarah. She was traveling to California with her new husband when their wagon train was attacked by raiders. Her husband died trying to protect her. Sarah survived, but she was hurt badly. The other families left her behind, saying she would slow them down. A trapper found her a week later and brought her to the nearest fort, but it was too late. She died from infection 3 days after they arrived. Vivian's hand found his, squeezing gently. I am so sorry. I got word a month after she died. I had just started building this place, full of plans and dreams about the life I was going to make. I rode to that fort thinking I would bring her back, bury her proper in our family plot in Pennsylvania. But they had already buried her there, just a plain wooden cross with her name on it. I stayed for a week, thinking I owed her that much, but eventually I had to come back. Life does not stop even when you want it to. Is that why you helped me? Vivian asked softly. Because of your sister, maybe, Samuel admitted. Maybe I thought if I could save you, it would somehow make up for not being able to save her. That does not make sense, I know. It makes perfect sense, Vivian said. She leaned her head against his shoulder and Samuel felt his breath catch. You gave me something I can never repay, Samuel. A second chance at life. Whatever I do with the rest of my days, I owe that to you. You do not owe me anything, Samuel said, but his arm moved almost of its own accord, wrapping around her shoulders. She fit against him perfectly, like she belonged there. They sat like that until full dark fell, watching the stars emerge one by one in the vast Wyoming sky. Neither of them spoke, but Samuel felt something fundamental shift between them that night. A line had been crossed, and there was no going back. The next morning, Vivian was quieter than usual. She made breakfast efficiently, but without her usual cheerful chatter. Samuel watched her move around the kitchen, wondering if he had overstepped the night before, if his arm around her shoulders had been too presumptuous. I have been thinking, Vivian said finally, setting his plate in front of him. I should probably start making plans to move on. I am healed now. I have imposed on your hospitality long enough. Samuel's coffee suddenly tasted like ash in his mouth. Where would you go? I do not know. Maybe I can find work in Enid. I can cook and clean, and I am good with numbers. Surely someone needs help. You do not have to leave, Samuel said, the words coming out too fast, too desperate. He tried to moderate his tone. I mean, you are welcome to stay as long as you need. There is no rush. Vivian sat down across from him, her hands folded on the table. She looked at him directly, those green eyes seeing too much. Samuel, what are we doing here? What do you mean? You know what I mean. This. She gestured between them. We have been dancing around it for weeks. I feel something when I am with you, something I have never felt before, and I think you feel it too. But we cannot keep pretending this is just you being charitable to someone in need. That is not what this is anymore. Samuel set down his fork, his appetite gone. She was right, of course. She was too smart and too direct to let them keep avoiding the obvious. "No," he said slowly. "It is not." "So what is it?" He looked at her, this woman who had come into his life by chance and accident, who had somehow become essential to him in the space of a few weeks. "I do not know. I have never been good with words. But I know that I think about you all day when I am working. I know that I look forward to coming back to the house because you are in it. I know that the thought of you leaving makes me feel like someone punched a hole in my chest." Vivian's eyes had gone soft. "I feel the same way. But Samuel, we barely know each other. We met because I was dying on the trail. That is not exactly a normal courtship." "Nothing about our situation is normal," Samuel agreed. "But that does not make what I feel any less real. I care about you, Vivian. More than I have cared about anyone in a long time, maybe more than I have ever cared about anyone." "I care about you too," Vivian said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But what does that mean? What happens now?" Samuel stood up and came around the table, kneeling beside her chair so they were at eye level. He took her hands in his, calloused and rough against her smaller, softer ones. "It means I am asking you to stay. Not as someone passing through, not as a guest. Stay here with me. Help me build this ranch into something worth having. Share my life. Samuel." She said his name like a prayer. "Are you asking me to marry you?" "Yes," he said simply. "I know it is fast. I know we have only known each other a few weeks. But I am 30 years old, Vivian. I have worked hard all my life, built this place from nothing. But all of it feels empty without someone to share it with, without you to share it with. I cannot promise you wealth or an easy life. Ranch work is hard, and there will be lean years and good years. But I can promise you loyalty and respect and everything I have to give. I will never let anyone hurt you again. I will spend the rest of my life making sure you are safe and cared for." Tears were streaming down Vivian's face now. "I am only 21. I have not seen anything of the world. I had plans, dreams of going to Oregon, maybe opening a dress shop like my mother always wanted." "Then I will not hold you back," Samuel said, though the words cost him. "If that is what you truly want, I will help you get to Oregon. I will give you money for the journey and a letter of introduction to my cousin in Portland. But Vivian, I need you to know that I am here. I am real. And what I feel for you is real." Vivian looked at him for a long moment, her expression torn between hope and fear. Then slowly, she reached out and cupped his face in her hands. "I do not want to go to Oregon," she said. "I want to stay here with you. I want to build a life together. I want to wake up every morning and see your face. I want to grow old on this ranch, raising cattle and children and making something that matters. Yes, Samuel. Yes, I will marry you." Samuel pulled her out of the chair and into his arms, holding her close. She was crying, and he thought he might be too, though he would deny it later. They stood there in the middle of his small kitchen, wrapped around each other like drowning people clinging to safety, and Samuel felt something in his chest expand and warm and fill spaces he had not even known were empty. "When?" Vivian asked against his shoulder. "Whenever you want." "Tomorrow, if you will have me that fast." She pulled back to look at him, smiling through her tears. "Let us at least wait until I have something decent to wear. Your shirt is comfortable, but it is not exactly a wedding dress." Samuel laughed, giddy with relief and joy. "We can ride into Enid this afternoon. There is a seamstress there, Mrs. Patterson. She can make you whatever you need. And a preacher, Reverend Mitchell. He holds services every Sunday in the schoolhouse. Good man, he will marry us." Vivian nodded, then suddenly went very still. "Samuel, I need to tell you something. Before we go any further, you need to know." His heart clenched with sudden fear. "What is it?" "Those men who killed my father. They did not just shoot him and leave. After I ran, after I hid in the rocks, I heard. I heard what they said they were going to do when they found me." Her voice had gone flat, emotionless. "They were looking for me for hours. If they had found me, killing me would have been a mercy compared to what they planned. I need you to understand that I am not coming to you innocent and untouched. I have seen the worst of what men can do. I have heard things that still wake me up at night. I am damaged, Samuel. Scarred, and not just on my shoulder." Samuel pulled her close again, resting his chin on top of her head. "You listen to me, Vivian Caldwell. You are a survivor. You are strong and brave and tougher than anyone I have ever met. What those men did, what they said, what they planned, that is not on you. That is their evil, not yours, and none of it changes how I feel about you. You could come to me with 100 scars, and I would count every one of them as proof of your strength." "You do not understand," Vivian said, her voice muffled against his chest. "I have nightmares. Sometimes I wake up screaming. Sometimes I cannot bear to be touched. What if I cannot be a proper wife to you?" "Then we figure it out together," Samuel said firmly. "Marriage is not just about one thing, Vivian. It is about building a life together through good times and bad. Whatever you need, whatever you can give, that is enough. You are enough, just as you are." He felt her body relax against him, the tension draining away. "How did I get so lucky as to be found by you?" she whispered. "I think maybe we are both lucky," Samuel said. "Now stop crying and let us go to town. We have a wedding to plan." The ride to Enid took about 2 hours, and Samuel used the time to point out the boundaries of his land, the best watering holes, the places where cattle like to congregate. Vivian listened intently, asking intelligent questions that showed she understood ranching better than most city girls would have. She sat her horse well too, despite her injured shoulder, moving with the animal rather than fighting it. Enid was not much of a town, just a main street with a general store, a saloon, a boarding house, a blacksmith, and a handful of other businesses. But it had what they needed. Samuel tied up the horses in front of Mrs. Patterson's shop and helped Vivian down from the saddle. "Samuel Jefferson, as I live and breathe," Mrs. Patterson exclaimed when they entered the shop, a bell tinkling overhead. She was a plump woman in her 50s with kind eyes and quick hands. "I have not seen you in months. And who is this lovely young lady, Mrs. Patterson? This is Vivian Caldwell. She is going to be my wife. We need a dress for the wedding." Mrs. Patterson's eyes went wide as saucers. "Your wife? Well, this is news. Come here, dear. Let me look at you." She pulled Vivian into the light from the window, turning her this way and that, taking measurements with a practiced eye. "Beautiful bone structure. That red hair will look stunning in cream or pale green. When is the wedding?" "As soon as possible," Samuel said. "A week, maybe." "A week, Mrs. Patterson threw up her hands. "Samuel Jefferson, do you know how long it takes to make a proper wedding dress?" "We do not need anything fancy," Vivian said quickly. "Just something nice and clean and proper. My old clothes were. Well, they are gone. I need a dress for the wedding and maybe 2 others for regular wear." Mrs. Patterson's expression softened. "I see. Well, I think I can manage something. I have a dress that was ordered by a girl who went and eloped before she could pick it up. It will need to be taken in and hemmed, but the fabric is beautiful. Let me show you." She disappeared into the back room and emerged with a dress that made Vivian gasp. It was simple but elegant, made of cream-colored silk with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. The style was modest, with long sleeves and a high neck, but the way it was cut spoke of quality and care. "It is beautiful," Vivian breathed, "but surely I cannot afford something like this." "Consider it my wedding gift," Mrs. Patterson said. "Samuel Jefferson is a good man who deserves some happiness. Now go try it on so I can see what alterations are needed." While Vivian was in the back room changing, Mrs. Patterson turned to Samuel with a shrewd expression. "Where did she come from? I have never seen her around these parts before." Samuel explained briefly about finding Vivian on the trail, caring for her injuries, leaving out the worst details of her father's death. Mrs. Patterson listened with increasing concern. "That poor girl. She has been through something terrible. You will be good to her, will you not, Samuel? She looks like she has known enough hardship." "I plan to spend the rest of my life being good to her," Samuel said quietly. Mrs. Patterson patted his arm. "I believe you. You have always been one of the decent ones." When Vivian emerged in the wedding dress, Samuel felt his breath catch. Even with the dress hanging loose and the hem dragging on the floor, she was stunning. The cream color made her skin glow and brought out the highlights in her hair. She looked nervous and happy and beautiful, and Samuel could not quite believe she had agreed to marry him. "What do you think?" Vivian asked, doing a small turn. "I think I am the luckiest man in Wyoming," Samuel said honestly, and both women laughed. Mrs. Patterson spent the next half hour pinning and tucking, making notes about what needed to be adjusted. Finally, she stood back, satisfied. "Come back in 3 days for a final fitting. I will have it ready by the end of the week. Now let us find you some regular dresses to wear in the meantime." They spent another hour selecting fabric and styles for 2 everyday dresses, a riding skirt, and some undergarments and chemises. Samuel tried not to think too hard about his future wife in those undergarments, but it was a losing battle. By the time they left the shop, his face was warm and Vivian kept giving him amused sideways glances. Their next stop was the general store, where they picked up supplies and Samuel introduced Vivian to Tom Hendricks, the owner. Tom was a gossipy old man who would make sure word of Samuel's engagement spread through the county by nightfall, which saved Samuel from having to announce it himself. "Engaged?" Tom exclaimed. "Well, I will be. Samuel Jefferson settling down, never thought I would see the day." "When is the wedding?" "Next Sunday," Samuel said. "After Reverend Mitchell's service. Everyone is welcome to attend." "I will spread the word," Tom promised, already mentally composing the announcement. Samuel was sure. "Folks will want to bring gifts and food for a celebration." "That is not necessary," Vivian started to say, but Samuel squeezed her hand. "Let them," he said quietly. "People around here do not get many reasons to celebrate. They will want to help." Their final stop was the Reverend Mitchell's small house behind the schoolhouse. The Reverend was a thin, serious man in his 40s who had come to Wyoming to bring religion to the frontier. He welcomed them into his home and listened gravely as Samuel explained about the upcoming wedding. "I will need to speak with Miss Caldwell privately," Reverend Mitchell said, "to ensure this marriage is entered into freely and with proper understanding." Samuel started to protest, but Vivian touched his arm. "It is all right. I understand." She turned to the Reverend. "I am here of my own free will. Samuel saved my life and has treated me with nothing but kindness and respect. I am marrying him because I love him, not because I feel obligated or coerced." Reverend Mitchell studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Very well. Sunday after the service, then. I will post the banns this week so there can be no question of propriety." As they rode back to the ranch in the fading afternoon light, Vivian was quiet. Samuel glanced over at her several times, trying to read her expression. "Having second thoughts?" he finally asked, trying to keep his voice light. "No," Vivian said immediately. "Not about marrying you. I was just thinking about how strange life is. 6 weeks ago, I was on a wagon heading to Oregon with my father, thinking I knew what my future would hold. Now he is dead, and I am about to marry a man I barely know, and somehow it feels more right than anything in my old life ever did." "I know what you mean," Samuel said. 6 weeks ago, the idea of marriage was the furthest thing from my mind. I thought I would spend the rest of my life alone, working this ranch until I was too old to sit a horse. And now, he trailed off, not quite sure how to finish the thought. And now you are stuck with me, Vivian finished, smiling. And now I get to spend my life with the most remarkable woman I have ever met, Samuel corrected. That does not sound like being stuck to me. Vivian's smile widened. You are going to make me cry again. Please do not. I am not sure I can handle much more emotion today. I think I used up my lifetime supply in that kitchen this morning. Vivian laughed, the sound carrying across the empty prairie. Samuel thought he would never get tired of hearing that sound. The week before the wedding passed in a blur of activity. Samuel worked from dawn until dusk getting the ranch in order, wanting everything to be perfect for when Vivian became his wife. He repaired the fence around the vegetable garden, fixed the loose board on the porch steps, whitewashed the outside of the cabin until it gleamed in the sun. He slaughtered a pig for the wedding feast and spent an evening digging a pit to roast it in. Vivian was equally busy, cleaning every inch of the cabin until it shone, making curtains for the windows from fabric Mrs. Patterson had given her, planting flowers in pots on the porch. She baked bread and pies, trying out recipes for the wedding meal, filling the cabin with smells that made Samuel's mouth water. They moved around each other carefully during those days, both aware that their relationship was about to change in fundamental ways. Samuel had insisted that Vivian keep the bed while he slept on a bedroll on the floor, despite her protests that it was his house and his bed. He would not have felt right doing otherwise, though it made for some uncomfortable nights. On the day of the final dress fitting, Samuel rode into town with Vivian. Mrs. Patterson had outdone herself. The wedding dress fit like it had been made specifically for Vivian, hugging her figure in all the right places while still maintaining perfect modesty. She looked like something out of a painting, and Samuel had to remind himself to breathe. You look perfect, he managed. Are you sure? Vivian turned in front of the mirror, examining herself critically. It does not seem too plain. It is perfect, Mrs. Patterson assured her. Simple and elegant, just like you, dear. Samuel will not be able to take his eyes off you. That was an understatement, Samuel thought. He was pretty sure he was going to make a fool of himself at the wedding, staring at his bride like a lovesick cow. But he found he did not care. Saturday evening, the night before the wedding, Samuel and Vivian sat on the porch watching the sun set. They had spent the day preparing food and making the cabin as presentable as possible. Everything was ready. Tomorrow, Vivian would become his wife. Are you nervous? Vivian asked, breaking the comfortable silence. Terrified, Samuel admitted. What if I am a terrible husband? What if I do something wrong and you realize you made a mistake? Vivian took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. You will not. You are a good man, Samuel. The best man I have ever known. Whatever happens, we will figure it out together. I am not good with words, Samuel said. I am not romantic or poetic. I do not know how to say the things I feel. You do not have to say them, Vivian said softly. You show me every day in 100 small ways. The way you look at me. The way you make sure I eat enough. The way you listen when I talk about my father. The way you rebuilt that rocking chair so I would have somewhere comfortable to sit in the evenings. Actions matter more than words, Samuel, and your actions have shown me exactly who you are. Samuel turned to her, cupping her face in his hands. Can I kiss you? Vivian's eyes went wide, then soft. Yes, please. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to change her mind, but she met him halfway. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, two people learning each other. Then Vivian made a small sound in the back of her throat and pressed closer, and Samuel deepened the kiss, pouring everything he felt into it. All the fear and hope and desperate love he had been carrying around for weeks. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Vivian rested her forehead against his. "Tomorrow cannot come soon enough," she whispered. "Tomorrow," Samuel agreed and kissed her again. Sunday morning dawned clear and beautiful, the Wyoming sky a perfect deep blue without a cloud in sight. Samuel woke early, too nervous to sleep, and spent an hour getting ready. He shaved carefully, trimmed his hair as best he could without a mirror, and put on his best clothes. They were not fancy, just clean trousers and a white shirt with a vest, but they were the best he owned. When he came back to the cabin from washing up at the pump, Vivian was already up, making breakfast. She was wearing one of her new everyday dresses, her hair pulled back in a simple braid. She looked beautiful and nervous and happy all at once. "You look nice," she said, setting a plate of eggs and bacon in front of him. "So do you," Samuel replied. "Are you ready?" "More ready than I have been for anything in my life," Vivian said. She sat down across from him, but neither of them seemed able to eat much. The food might as well have been sawdust for all the attention they paid it. They loaded the wagon with the wedding dress and the food Vivian had prepared, then rode into Enid together. The little town was already bustling with activity. It seemed like everyone in the county had turned out for the wedding, drawn by curiosity and the promise of a good meal. Mrs. Patterson swept Vivian away to the back room of the general store to help her change into the wedding dress. Samuel found himself surrounded by men he knew from around the county, all offering congratulations and advice. "Make sure you are firm but fair," old Tom Hendricks said, puffing on his pipe. "Women need to know who is in charge." "That is terrible advice," Jacob Morrison, a young rancher from the next county over, interjected. "My wife would tan my hide if I tried to order her around. Marriage is a partnership, Samuel. Treat her like an equal." "Just make sure she knows you love her," said Peter Chen, a Chinese immigrant who ran a small farm with his wife. "Everything else works itself out if you have love." Samuel listened to all of them, taking in the sometimes contradictory advice, but in the end he decided to follow his own instincts. He would treat Vivian with respect and kindness, listen to her opinions, and build a life together as partners. Everything else would come. When Vivian finally emerged from the general store, the breath went out of Samuel's lungs. She was radiant in the cream-colored dress, her hair falling in loose waves down her back, her eyes shining with happiness and nerves. She walked toward him slowly, and Samuel met her halfway, offering his arm. "You are the most beautiful thing I have ever seen," he said quietly, and watched her blush pink. "You are not so bad yourself," she replied, her voice shaking just a little. They walked together to the schoolhouse, where Reverend Mitchell was waiting. The small building was packed with people, standing room only. Samuel had not realized how many neighbors he had until they all showed up to watch him get married. It was both comforting and nerve-wracking. The ceremony itself passed in a blur. Samuel heard himself repeating vows, promising to love and honor and cherish Vivian for the rest of his life. He heard her voice, strong and clear, promising the same. He slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, one he had commissioned from the blacksmith a week earlier. And then Reverend Mitchell was pronouncing them husband and wife, and Samuel was kissing Vivian in front of God and everyone, and his heart felt like it might burst with joy. The celebration afterward was everything Samuel had not known he wanted. Long tables had been set up outside, groaning under the weight of food that neighbors had brought. There was music, a fiddler and a man with a guitar playing reels and ballads. People danced and laughed and ate and drank, celebrating the union of two people who had found each other against impossible odds. Samuel danced with Vivian, holding her close and trying not to step on her feet. He was not a good dancer, but she did not seem to mind. She smiled up at him like he hung the moon, and Samuel felt like maybe, just maybe, he could live up to that look. As the sun began to set and people started to head home, Samuel and Vivian climbed into their wagon, ready to return to the ranch. Their ranch now, Samuel thought. Their home. Happy? He asked as they rode through the gathering darkness. Happier than I knew was possible, Vivian replied. She was leaning against his shoulder, and Samuel could hear the smile in her voice. Thank you for this, Samuel, for giving me a home and a future when I had nothing. You gave me the same thing, Samuel said. I just did not know I needed it until you showed up. When they reached the ranch, Samuel helped Vivian down from the wagon, then surprised her by sweeping her up in his arms. What are you doing? She laughed. I am supposed to carry you over the threshold, Samuel said. It is tradition. I did not know you cared about tradition. There are a lot of things you do not know about me yet, Samuel said, pushing open the door with his boot. We have the rest of our lives to figure it out. He set her down gently inside, and for a moment they just stood there, looking at each other. The cabin was dim, lit only by the moonlight streaming through the windows. Samuel could see uncertainty in Vivian's eyes and remembered her earlier confession about her fears. We do not have to do anything tonight except sleep, he said quietly. I meant what I said, Vivian. I will never push you to do anything you are not ready for. Vivian looked at him for a long moment, then reached up and began unbuttoning his vest. I am ready, she said. I am scared, but I am ready. I trust you, Samuel. I love you. I love you too, Samuel said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. He led her to the bed, their bed now, and showed her with gentle hands and whispered words just how much she meant to him. Vivian trembled at first, but slowly relaxed into his touch, trusting him with her fears and her body and her heart. When they finally came together, it was with tenderness and love, two damaged souls finding healing in each other. Afterward, Vivian curled against Samuel's chest, her breathing slowly evening out into sleep. Samuel held her close, feeling the warmth of her body against his, and thought about how strange and wonderful life could be. 6 weeks ago, he had been alone, resigned to spending his life working a ranch by himself. Now he had a wife, a partner, someone to share his days and nights with. He thought about Vivian's father, dead on the trail. About his own sister, dead far from home. About all the small choices and chances that had led to this moment. If he had ridden a different trail that day, if he had left home an hour earlier or later, if Vivian had run in a different direction, or if those men had found her. So many things that could have gone differently. But they had not. Somehow, against all odds, two broken people had found each other and decided to build something new together. It was not the life either of them had planned, but maybe it was something better, something worth fighting for. Samuel kissed the top of Vivian's head and let himself drift off to sleep, content in a way he had never been before. The first year of marriage was an adjustment for both of them. Samuel had been alone for so long that sharing his space and his life took some getting used to. Vivian, for her part, was dealing with grief over her father while also learning the rhythms of ranch life and marriage. There were arguments over small things, like how to organize the kitchen or when to plant the garden. There were difficult nights when Vivian woke screaming from nightmares, and Samuel held her until the shaking stopped. But there were also moments of perfect happiness. Quiet mornings drinking coffee on the porch as the sun came up. Working side by side during the day, Vivian proving herself as capable with cattle as any hired hand. Evenings spent reading aloud to each other or playing cards or just talking about everything and nothing. Nights in each other's arms, learning the language of each other's bodies and hearts. Vivian threw herself into ranch life with the same determination she had shown in surviving her ordeal on the trail. She learned to rope calves, brand cattle, mend fences, and treat common injuries and illnesses in the herd. She was tough and fearless, willing to work from dawn until dusk without complaint. The other ranchers in the area, who had been skeptical at first about Samuel's city bride, quickly developed respect for Vivian's capabilities. Samuel, in turn, learned to share decisions and responsibilities. He had been making all the choices himself for so long that it was strange at first to consult someone else, but he quickly came to value Vivian's input. She had a good head for numbers and helped him organize the ranch finances in a way that made sense. She suggested improvements that he would never have thought of, like breeding some of their cattle with a bull from a neighboring ranch to improve the stock. By the time winter came, bringing snow and freezing temperatures to Wyoming, they had settled into a comfortable rhythm. The cabin, which had once seemed adequate, was now cozy and warm with Vivian's touches everywhere. Curtains on the windows, a braided rug on the floor, quilts on the bed that she had sewn herself. It felt like a home in a way it never had before. One evening in late December, Samuel came in from checking on the cattle to find Vivian standing by the stove, one hand pressed to her stomach. She looked pale and unsteady, and Samuel was at her side in an instant. "What is wrong? Are you sick?" "No," Vivian said slowly. "I do not think so. At least, not the way you mean." She looked up at him, her eyes wide. "Samuel, I think I might be pregnant." Samuel felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. "Are you sure?" "I have missed my monthly courses twice now, and I have been feeling sick in the mornings. And my breasts are tender. All the signs my mother told me about." She was still pale, but there was excitement in her voice now. "We are going to have a baby, Samuel." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. A baby. He was going to be a father. The idea was terrifying and wonderful all at once. "Are you happy about this?" "Yes," Vivian said immediately. "Scared out of my mind, but happy." "What about you?" "Same," Samuel admitted. "I do not know the first thing about being a father. What if I do it wrong?" "Then we will figure it out together," Vivian said, echoing her words from their wedding night. "We always do." The pregnancy was not easy. Vivian was sick nearly every morning for the first few months, and Samuel felt helpless watching her suffer. She insisted on continuing to work around the ranch, though he tried to get her to rest more. It was not in her nature to sit idle. Women have been having babies and working right up until the birth since the beginning of time. Vivian told him when he fussed over her. "I am not going to spend 9 months lying in bed like some fragile doll." "I know you are strong," Samuel said. "I just worry." "That is what husbands do," Vivian said, patting his cheek. "And I love you for it, but you need to trust me to know my own limits." As spring came and Vivian's belly grew round with their child, Samuel found himself working harder than ever to prepare for the baby. He built a cradle from smooth pine, sanding it for hours until there was no chance of a splinter. He reinforced the cabin roof, worried about leaks. He slaughtered an extra cow and smoked the meat, wanting to make sure they had plenty of food for when the baby came and Vivian was recovering. Vivian, meanwhile, sewed tiny clothes and blankets, her hands moving constantly. She talked to the baby as she worked, telling stories about Samuel and the ranch and the life they were building. Samuel would listen sometimes, pretending to read but really just watching his wife with wonder. She glowed with pregnancy, more beautiful than ever. In late June, Vivian's pain started. Samuel had ridden into town 2 weeks earlier and convinced Mrs. Patterson to come stay with them until the baby was born. The older woman had helped deliver dozens of babies and knew what to do. Samuel was grateful for her presence, because he was absolutely useless, pacing outside the cabin like a caged animal while Vivian labored inside. The birth took all day and into the night. Samuel heard Vivian crying out in pain and had to restrain himself from bursting inside. Mrs. Patterson had been very firm that he was to stay outside unless called for. Finally, as the sun was beginning to rise on a new day, Samuel heard a different cry, a baby's cry. Mrs. Patterson opened the door, her face tired but smiling. "You have a son, Samuel, a healthy, strong son. And Vivian did wonderfully. She is asking for you." Samuel pushed past her into the cabin. Vivian was propped up in bed, sweaty and exhausted but smiling. In her arms was a tiny bundle, and when Samuel got closer, he saw a red, wrinkled face and a shock of dark hair. His son, his child. "Would you like to hold him?" Vivian asked softly. Samuel nodded, not trusting his voice. He took the baby carefully, terrified he might break this fragile new life. But the baby just yawned and settled against his chest, perfectly content. Samuel felt tears running down his face and did not bother to wipe them away. "What should we name him?" Vivian asked. Samuel thought for a moment. "Robert," he said, "after your father, if that is all right with you." Vivian's eyes filled with tears. "Robert Samuel Jefferson, it is perfect." Baby Robert was a good child, healthy and happy, though he kept them up at all hours those first few months. Samuel and Vivian took turns walking the floor with him, soothing his cries. They were both exhausted, but it was a good kind of tired, the kind that came from doing something that mattered. Samuel watched Vivian with their son and fell in love with her all over again. She was patient and nurturing, singing lullabies that her own mother had sung to her. She fed him and bathed him and rocked him with infinite tenderness. Samuel had known she was strong, but he had not fully appreciated her capacity for love until he saw her with their child. As Robert grew from an infant into a toddler, the ranch continued to prosper. Samuel had built up his herd significantly, and the extra hands he had hired spoke well of him throughout the county. People knew Samuel Jefferson as a fair man, honest in his dealings and good to his workers. Vivian was equally respected, known for her kindness and her willingness to help anyone who needed it. She kept a pot of stew on the stove year-round, ready to feed any traveler who came by in need of a meal. 2 years after Robert was born, Vivian found herself pregnant again. This time, she had an easier time of it, though she was just as stubborn about continuing to work. Their second child, a daughter they named Sarah after Samuel's sister, was born on a crisp October morning. She had her mother's green eyes and red-brown hair, and Samuel was smitten from the first moment he held her. With 2 small children, life on the ranch was chaotic and wonderful. Robert was curious and fearless, always getting into trouble, while Sarah was calmer but incredibly stubborn. They kept Samuel and Vivian constantly busy, but neither of them would have changed a thing. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Samuel took Vivian back to Enid for dinner at the boarding house, leaving the children with Mrs. Patterson for the evening. It was a rare moment alone together, and they savored it. Over a meal of roast beef and potatoes, Samuel reached across the table and took Vivian's hand. "You ever regret it?" he asked. "Staying here instead of going to Oregon, marrying a rancher instead of opening that dress shop?" Vivian looked at him like he was crazy. "Not for a single second. Samuel, you gave me everything I did not even know I wanted. A home, a family, a purpose. I love our life. I love you." "I love you too," Samuel said. "More than I thought it was possible to love anyone. You took a lonely man and a broken-down ranch and made them into something worth having." "We made it together," Vivian corrected. "Everything we have, we built side by side. That is what makes it special." They clinked glasses, toasting to 5 years of marriage and to all the years ahead. Samuel looked at his wife, still beautiful, still tough, still the most remarkable woman he had ever known, and felt grateful for every decision and chance occurrence that had led them to each other. The years continued to pass. Robert grew into a strong boy who loved the ranch and the cattle as much as his father did. Sarah was clever and bookish, always asking questions about how things worked. 2 more children followed, another son named James and a daughter named Elizabeth. The cabin, which had once seemed adequate for one man, was now bursting at the seams with life and love and noise. Samuel expanded the house, adding 2 more rooms so the children would not be sleeping on top of each other. He built a larger barn and added more cattle to the herd. The ranch became one of the most successful in the county, not because of any genius on Samuel's part, but because he and Vivian worked together, making decisions jointly and supporting each other through droughts and harsh winters and all the other challenges that came with ranch life. They faced their share of difficulties over the years. There was the winter when they lost 30 head of cattle to a blizzard, and the summer when a prairie fire came within a mile of their house before the wind shifted. There was the year when Robert broke his arm falling from a horse, and the terrifying week when Sarah came down with scarlet fever. But they weathered every storm together, their love and partnership growing stronger with each challenge overcome. As the children grew older and more capable, they took on more responsibilities around the ranch. Robert was a natural cowboy, able to rope and ride with the best of them by the time he was 12. Sarah surprised everyone by developing a talent for breaking horses, a skill that earned her respect from the ranch hands and neighboring ranchers alike. James and Elizabeth were still young, but they helped with the chickens and the garden and all the small tasks that kept the ranch running. On a warm summer evening when Samuel was 45 and Vivian was 36, they sat on the porch watching the sunset just like they had on their wedding night 15 years earlier. The children were inside, Robert helping James with homework while Sarah read a story to Elizabeth. The sounds of their voices drifted through the open windows. "Hard to believe it has been 15 years, Samuel said, his arm around Vivian's shoulders. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday," Vivian replied. "Sometimes it feels like we have always been together. Is that strange?" "No." "I feel the same way." Samuel kissed the top of her head. "Do you remember what you said to me on our wedding night, about being scared but ready?" "I remember everything about our wedding night," Vivian said with a smile. "Why?" "I was thinking about how far we have come since then. How much we have built together. 4 children, a successful ranch, a good life. It all started because I happened to ride down that particular trail on that particular day and found you there." "Fate," Vivian said. "It has to be fate. The odds of everything working out the way it did are too impossible otherwise." "Maybe," Samuel agreed. "Or maybe we just got incredibly lucky. Either way, I am grateful every day." "Me too," Vivian said. She turned to look at him, her green eyes still as bright and clear as the day he had first seen them open on the trail. "You know what the strangest part is? When I was lying there in the dirt, bleeding and thinking I was going to die, I remember feeling angry about all the things I would never get to do, the life I would never have. And now, I have lived more than I ever imagined possible. I have known love and built a home and raised children. I have had adventures and challenges and moments of perfect joy, all because you stopped when you could have ridden on." "I could never have ridden past you," Samuel said. "From the moment I saw you, something in me knew you were important, that you would change everything. I have never regretted stopping, not for 1 second." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sky turn from orange to pink to deep purple. Inside, the children had settled down, their voices quieter now as evening routines began. "What do you think happens next?" Vivian asked. "The children are growing up. In a few years, Robert will be old enough to go out on his own if he wants. Sarah, too. James and Elizabeth will follow soon enough. Eventually, it will just be you and me again. Then we will figure out what comes next together, Samuel said, echoing the words that had become their motto over the years. Maybe we will travel, see some of that world you never got to experience, or maybe we will stay right here and help with grandchildren. As long as we are together, I do not much care what we do. Grandchildren, Vivian said with a laugh. That makes me feel old. You are not old. You are perfect. You are biased. Absolutely, Samuel agreed, but that does not make it less true. As the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Robert came to the door. Ma, Elizabeth wants you to tuck her in. She says I do not do the voices right when I read to her. I will be right there, Vivian said. She stood, stretching, then bent to kiss Samuel. Do not stay out here too long. You have to get up early tomorrow to help with that fence repair. Yes, madam, Samuel said with a smile. He watched her go inside, heard her voice mixing with their children's voices, and felt a contentment so deep it was almost painful. This was what he had always wanted without knowing he wanted it. Not just a successful ranch or financial security, but this. A family. Love. A life shared with someone who understood him and challenged him and made him want to be better. The ranch continued to grow and prosper over the next several years. Robert, now 18, had become Samuel's right hand, handling many of the day-to-day operations. He was talking about buying his own land eventually, maybe starting his own ranch on the property adjacent to theirs that had recently gone up for sale. Sarah, at 16, was still as horse-mad as ever and had started a small business training horses for other ranchers in the county. James, at 14, was showing an aptitude for numbers and was helping Vivian keep the ranch books. Elizabeth, the baby at 12, had developed a passion for cooking and kept the family well fed with increasingly elaborate meals. Samuel and Vivian watched their children grow with a mixture of pride and bittersweet awareness that their time of having them all at home was limited. But they also looked forward to the next phase of their lives together, whatever it might bring. One evening in early spring, a stranger rode up to the ranch. Samuel went out to greet him, cautious but not unfriendly. The man was older, maybe 60, with gray hair and a weathered face that spoke of years in the sun. "Can I help you?" Samuel asked. "I am looking for Vivian Caldwell," the man said. "Or I suppose she might have married by now. Vivian Jefferson, perhaps?" Samuel felt a sudden wariness. "Who is asking? My name is Thomas Caldwell. I am her uncle from Oregon." Samuel called for Vivian, and she came out of the house wiping her hands on her apron. When she saw the stranger, she stopped dead, her face going pale. "Uncle Thomas, Vivian." The old man dismounted, moving stiffly. "I have been looking for you for 15 years. When you and your brother Robert never arrived in Portland, I tried to find out what happened. It took me years to track down the story. A wagon attacked, your father killed, you disappeared. I thought you were dead too. But last month I met a traveling merchant who had been through Enid. He mentioned Samuel Jefferson and his wife Vivian Caldwell Jefferson. I thought maybe, possibly, it could be you." Vivian moved forward slowly, like she was in a dream. "You came all this way. You are my family," Thomas said simply. "I had to know, had to see if it was really you." Vivian embraced him, crying, and Samuel felt a lump in his own throat. This was the uncle she had been trying to reach all those years ago, the family she had thought she would never see again. Thomas stayed with them for 2 weeks, getting to know his niece and her family. He told stories about Vivian's father, about the family history she had thought was lost. In turn, Vivian showed him the life she had built, introducing him to his 4 great nieces and nephews, showing him around the ranch, explaining how she and Samuel had created all of this together. On the night before Thomas was set to return to Oregon, they had a big family dinner. All the children were there, dressed in their best, on their best behavior. Thomas sat at the head of the table, looking around at all of them with wonder. "You have built something remarkable here," he said to Samuel and Vivian. "A real legacy. Your father would be proud, Vivian." "I hope so," Vivian said quietly. "I think about him often, wonder what he would think of my life." "He would think you did exactly what you should have done," Thomas said firmly. "You survived. You thrived. You built a family and a home. That is what he would have wanted for you." After Thomas left, heading back to Oregon with promises to stay in touch, Samuel found Vivian standing in the barn, staring out at the Wyoming landscape bathed in moonlight. "Are you all right?" he asked, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "Yes," Vivian said. "I am just thinking. About my father, about the path that led me here. Uncle Thomas coming, it brought back a lot of memories. That scared girl dying on the trail, my father's death, all of it. Do you wish things had been different, that you had made it to Oregon?" "No," Vivian said immediately. "How could I wish that? Everything I love is here. You, our children, this ranch, this life. If I had made it to Oregon, I would have had a completely different existence. Maybe a good one, but not this one. Not with you." "I am glad fate or luck or whatever it was brought you to me," Samuel said. "Even though it came at such a terrible cost. Is that wrong to say?" "No," Vivian said, turning in his arms to face him. "I think my father would understand. He wanted me to be happy and safe. I am both of those things thanks to you. That is not wrong. That is beautiful." They stood there in the barn for a long time, holding each other. Two people who had found love in the most unlikely of circumstances and built something lasting from it. The years continued their steady march forward. Robert married a girl from a neighboring ranch and built his own spread on the property adjacent to Samuel's, just as he had planned. Sarah shocked everyone by falling in love with a traveling horse trader and moving with him to California, though she wrote frequently and visited when she could. James went to university in Denver to study business, with plans to return and help expand the ranch into a larger operation. Elizabeth, the youngest, was courting a young man from Enid who had recently started working as the town's new schoolteacher. Samuel and Vivian, now in their 50s, found themselves gradually stepping back from the day-to-day operations of the ranch. Robert was more than capable of handling things, and they had trained their children well. For the first time in decades, they had time to simply be together without the constant demands of work and raising a family. They took to going on long rides together, exploring the land they had called home for so long. They read books aloud to each other in the evenings, something they had not had time for when the children were young. They talked about everything and nothing, making up for years of conversations cut short by children needing attention or chores needing done. "Do you know what I love most about getting older?" Vivian said one evening as they sat on the porch, her head resting on Samuel's shoulder. "What?" "I do not have to wonder anymore. When we were young, when we first married, there was always this question in the back of my mind. Would our love last? Would we make it through the hard times? Would we grow apart or grow together? Now I know. We have been through everything life could throw at us and we came through it together. I do not have to wonder anymore if we will make it. We already have. We have we not?" Samuel said with satisfaction. 30 years married, 4 children raised, a successful ranch built from almost nothing. I would say we did pretty well for ourselves. "More than pretty well," Vivian said. "We did magnificently, against all odds." Samuel thought about the scared, injured young woman he had found on the trail 3 decades ago. About the lonely rancher he had been, resigned to a life alone. about all the small moments and big decisions that had brought them to this moment, sitting on a porch in the fading light, still in love after all these years. "You know what I think," he said. "What?" "I think we were always meant to find each other. I do not know if that is fate or God or just dumb luck, but I think somehow, someway we were always going to end up here, together." "I like that idea," Vivian said. "It makes all the pain and loss feel like it meant something, like it was leading somewhere." "It was leading here," Samuel said. "To this life. To us." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set, painting the Wyoming sky in brilliant shades of orange and red and gold. Somewhere in the distance, they could hear Robert calling to his own children, the next generation of Jeffersons growing up on this land. The cattle lowed softly in their pastures. The windmill creaked in the evening breeze, a sound so familiar it was like hearing home itself. Samuel thought about everything he had gained from that chance encounter on the trail so long ago. A wife, a partner, a family, a legacy. Vivian had given him all of that and so much more. She had taken a simple rancher with simple dreams and shown him that life could be bigger and richer and more meaningful than he had ever imagined. And what had he given her in return? He had saved her life, yes, but she had saved his too, in a different way. She had saved him from loneliness and purposelessness. She had given him a reason to build something that would outlast them both. She had shown him what love really meant, not just a feeling but a choice made every day to stand together against whatever came. "I love you, Vivian Jefferson," Samuel said into the gathering darkness. "I have loved you since the moment you opened your eyes on that trail. I will love you until the day I die and probably beyond that." "I love you too, Samuel," Vivian replied. "Thank you for stopping that day. Thank you for not riding past. Thank you for carrying me home." "Thank you for letting me," Samuel said. "Thank you for choosing to stay. Thank you for building this life with me." "I would choose you 1,000 times over," Vivian said. "In any life, in any time, I would always choose you." Samuel pulled her closer, and they sat together as the stars emerged one by one in the darkening sky. Two souls who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from tragedy and chance. The ranch that stretched out around them was more than just land and cattle and buildings. It was a testament to what two people could create when they worked together, when they loved each other through good times and bad, when they refused to give up no matter how hard things got. The story of how Samuel Jefferson found Vivian Caldwell injured on a trail in Wyoming and carried her home would be told for generations in their family. Their great-grandchildren would hear about the brave young woman who walked 15 miles with a bullet in her shoulder, and the kind rancher who stopped to help when he could have ridden on. They would hear about how love could spring from tragedy, how two broken people could heal each other, how a chance encounter could change the course of multiple lives. But sitting there on that porch, Samuel and Vivian were not thinking about legacy or family stories. They were simply grateful for every moment they had been given together, and for all the moments still to come. They had built a good life on this Wyoming land, full of love and purpose and meaning. It was more than either of them had dared to hope for that day on the trail 30 years ago. As the evening deepened and the air grew cool, they finally went inside, hand in hand, ready to face whatever the future held together. Behind them, the ranch settled into its nighttime rhythms, a place of life and love built on a foundation of compassion and chance, and the simple decision to help a stranger in need. It was a good ending to their story, but Samuel and Vivian knew it was not really an ending at all. It was just another chapter in a life still being lived, still being written, still full of possibilities. And that, they both agreed, was exactly how it should be.